it's so important not to lose sight of who's your client. I've always thought that it's important to be seen. And if somebody doesn't see you out there on the job site, then they can see you, they can vet you online, digitally. It's almost like a new word of mouth. So I think that restorers should be educators first. I think it's so important for the restorers to focus on the relationship and the contract between those first two parties that met and said, hey, I want to hire you.
Given that, I guess this, we're obviously focusing very highly on this, make your time worth it, put it in where you need to, but also don't be afraid to cut yourself off when it's unnecessary, right? Trim the fat. What kind of perspective do you think this provided you with? And then obviously throughout your journey, that then now you look into this restoration industry after these years, after these, multiple areas you've seen that you think could really be improved or like something that, I wouldn't say needs to change, but something that could help benefit these industry with the clients and carriers that you guys are working with. Is there anything unique that you've seen because of this journey you've taken that's specific to that?
Yeah, so I'm sure it's not unique, but when I think about restoration and I think about its relationship with stakeholders, because I'm a certified project management professional, and I love the PMP framework by Project Management Institute. It gave me like a language to make sense of how a project is managed and governed. Stakeholder management and insurance losses are very interesting things. Like the thing that blew my mind in restoration from day one, it's like, oh, make this piece of paper. We call it like a work authorization. Have the client just scribble something on it, and then you start tearing things apart. Well, we're drying and we're cleaning and we're fighting mold, and then we send our bill not to the person who's let's say home we mitigated, but to somebody else, right? And it was part of the reason I got into the restoration industry because I saw the opportunity for win-win. Hey, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to follow best practices. IICRC this, like we're following the book, right? And then you send the invoice to someone else. Well, what's the dynamic? It's like a weird love triangle. And I think that it's so important not to lose sight of who's your client because and this is different than TPA work and working with some of these carrier programs, which has its place. But let's be honest, when you're doing TPA work, you really are a hired gun of the insurance carrier. Your agreement is with them, and then you just go do the thing at the client at the I'll say the insured's home or property. Whereas when someone calls you, for us, we have a very good rating online. We invest in our digital presence. I should say we invest in some digital marketing. We have a very strong social media presence. I've always thought that it's important to be seen. And if somebody doesn't see you out there on the job site, then they can see you, they can vet you online, digitally. It's almost like a new word of mouth, but they call you. It's you and them. And then it's only this weird third party only comes in kind of later on. I think it's so important for the restorers to focus on the relationship and the agreement and the contract and the expectations between those first two parties that met and said, hey, I want to hire you. Well, why do you want to hire me? Just because I'm the first piece of paper with a pen to be presented to you? Do you know what you're getting? And I think that restorers need to keep focusing even more on what is the role that the carrier plays. And the landscape has changed just in the 5 short years that I've been in this industry, especially when I look at the last 365 days, the practices, methods that carriers use to adjust losses and third parties and what they do and they don't do. There's the classic, delay, deny, defend. That is it, there's this weird relationship between the insurance carrier that has to uphold their, I don't know if it's a fiduciary responsibility or the indemnification, right, of their client who pays their premiums. But it's like, well, how much does it cost? And if you're going to send a bill to a carrier, like, and sometimes it's like plug it into Xactimate and whatever it spits out, it spits out. Like, well, is that the value of the project? What was it worth? There's this weird, like fake insurance industry valuation that I think it needs to be substantive because when I think about myself, if I'm an insured, if I have a loss event and you walk into my home and I don't know anything, I'm going to be like, well, how does this, I want to be educated. So I think that restorers should be educators first. And we should hold the client's hand through the process, educate them on the options that they have, on some of the booby traps, the points of failure, the limitations. You want this, but if I don't do this, I have exposure. You tell me not to touch this room that's affected or these contents. And well, let me just warn you, if I don't do this, if I don't follow best practices, then this might happen. If I do, and the bill goes higher and it's not covered, or the carrier just draws an arbitrary line. So when we talk about where we're at in 2024, there's a lot of arbitrary lines being drawn on, oh, we decided that this is the value. It's these unilateral decisions that, whatever a third party reviewer says is the value of a loss. I say, restorers, you better figure out what the hell you're doing and what it's worth and command the value. Don't demand the value. So whether it's a human doing it or it's a kick-ass software that supplements and saves time, well, that's an investment. Like, right. So is it hours? Are we trading time for money? Because a software is developed and we have to learn a software. We have to deploy a software. We have to utilize it. Well, what's the cost of that? Forget about the cost. What's the value of it? So be value creators. And what I see, you can't go to the supermarket, walk out with a grocery full of stuff and be like, yeah, just send the bill to somebody else, right? Yet somehow it's fine. That's how we do it in restoration. Economists, probably just cringe thinking about that model because, again, accountability. Where is the accountability? And then the restore's like, oh, no one wants to pay me, and sometimes we're the big baby who's whining about not getting our bill paid. Well, what did we do? Did we create the value that we say? Did we justify it? So strong documentation, and it's a lot of do first and then back it up. Well, you better be backing it up as you do it. And I like to say, take the client on a journey. Whoever signed your contract, your agreement, and gave you the green light to do the thing, well, you sure as hell better express the value to them. Because you can't get to the end, and then I like to go, here's the bill.
Right.
Right? If you went to a nice restaurant and you didn't have the prices and you just ordered all this food, and then you get hit with the bill, like...
Right.
I think that's what we've been guilty of for a long time, is the getting hit with the restoration bill. And it's not how it should go. So, we shouldn't assume that that's okay. Just because cavemen used to act a certain way, like, let's keep evolving. Let's be providers of value and solutions. So I try to hold myself and my team to that standard and think from the client's perspective.
I definitely agree with that. That's it's good to drive the value first, focus on the cost later, because you can't fight value. It's there, it's proven, it's right in front of you.
Make it tangible.
Well, Phil, this has been an awesome conversation that we've had here today. I guess to wrap things up, is there anything that you'd like to tell the audience? This Magic Plan listener that's tuning into this here today. If you had any advice or just any food for thought to leave them with, what would that be?
I mean, if we were just echoing the same sentiment, it's just people first, right? So start with yourself, try to figure out who you are, what you want, directionally, where you want to go, and then is starting a business right for you? Do you want to be responsible for the growth, development, and success of other people? And then if so, how are you going to create that? And what resources, what tools are you going to recruit to help you get there, to help them get there, and serve other people? And I always say selfless, selfish. Me being selfish a lot of times is me being selfless. If I do it for you and I try to help you sincerely, and I say it like this, if you're a teacher, then you're also an active student. So the more that I find myself teaching, training, and coaching, the more I have to listen to myself. So try to make your own decisions. Try to figure out your decision-making process, and whether it's deciding what industry to get into, whether to start your own business, whether to grow your business, whether to go from one business to 2 or 10 to 11, or, should I choose Magic Plan or the next thing or the next thing? Like, have a process, right? And then start the process, live the process, and love the process. That's my message. Love the process.
Cool. Well, Phil, we really appreciate you taking some time to speak with us here today. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And to all the Magic Plan listeners, stay tuned for our next episode coming out soon.
Thanks, guys.